Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Baldissera Giovani. Dear colleagues, it is a pleasure to welcome you at this EU Green Week partner event on improving knowledge, skills and capacity building to ensure plant health in more sustainable agricultural systems. Approximately 150 experts from organizations involved in research programming and funding, policy making, and public and private sector researchers from more than 30 countries worldwide have registered. The webinar is co-organized by the Plants for the Future ETP and Euphresco Network for Phytosanitary Research Coordination and Funding. Plants for the Future is a multi-stakeholder European platform that represents the plant sector from basic research to crop production and distribution. They work together to develop a forward-looking common vision of future agri-food systems by outlining the challenges and opportunities and identifying key research and innovation needs. Euphresco is an international network of national research program owners and managers, policymakers, and research organizations that aim to coordinate research and deliver research evidence and solutions fit for the use of the end users, in particular regulators. Today's webinar is an opportunity to discuss through practical examples from activities conducted in the framework of Plant ETP and Euphresco, the use of basic substances and biological control agents and the practical challenges associated to the development of alternative low hazard plant protection products and for gaining market access for new products. All this to demonstrate knowledge exchange, capacity building, and international coordination and collaboration are needed to address global challenges and to move forward more sustainable agricultural systems.
Basically, this webinar is really an opportunity to discuss with the different stakeholders and researchers and policymakers. And so really looking at the policy landscape around alternative plant protection products or PPPs, looking also at recent research activities on sustainable pest management methods and the challenges and opportunities that are linked to these alternative PPPs, but also acknowledging and discussing the bottlenecks that are limiting the translation of the research and innovation into actual solutions on the ground for EU agriculture. And then, as Baldissera mentioned, also the needs in terms of knowledge, skills, and capacity building, and also a more uplifting note, the opportunities that we have for accelerating the use of research outputs into the field. So before I hand over to our speakers, I just wanted to have the general housekeeping rules. So you are here as attendees. Unfortunately, you are muted by default and can't use your cameras, but you can ask questions, and we really invite you to ask your questions using Slido. So you go to slido.do or slido.com, it's the same thing, and then you type hashtag #planthealth_GW23. And then you can just ask your questions, and you can also up or down vote other people's questions. And because we won't have that much time, only half an hour for the Q&A, we will make use of that and address the most popular questions during that Q&A. So we'll go through all the presentations, and at 3 o'clock we'll head to the Q&A and then have the discussion until the end of the webinar. So thank you very much. I will now hand over to our first speaker, Domenico De Serio.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Domenico De Serio, indeed, and I work for the European Commission in the unit dealing with regulations for plant protection product. In particular, we are working on ensuring, indeed, access to new and innovative low-active plant protection product. Low hazard, hopefully really active plant protection product. Sorry, I was reading something else in the meanwhile because I'm waiting the slides to come up.
I hope you have your slides memorized and you can just wait.
Well, I can start talking if you wish, just for the audience. Well, I'm a policymaker, as I was saying, and our activities are mainly focused within the farm to fork strategy. I expect, the audience to be well prepared on what the farm to fork strategy objectives are. In particular, we are working on reducing the use of chemical hazardous pesticide by 50%. and increasing the EU agricultural land dedicated to organic farming. So, and as I was saying, well, the farm to fork strategy, I've been talking about it already.
I think you have
yes,
the control now, Domenico.
Now,
sorry,
yes, now I can see.
Yes.
And basically our activities are framed within the integrated pest management principles you might know already, which aims indeed at reducing the use of chemical methods as much as possible by employing IPM strategy principles. In particular, we are working on expanding the farmer's toolbox as regard the availability of sustainable biological alternatives. Just to get into some more details of what we have been doing and our activities, I just would like to give you some brief introduction of our regulatory framework, which regulates indeed the access to market of substances. This is the same framework for chemicals and biological substances, the Regulation 1107/2009. Just very, very briefly, the regulation provides that an application is submitted by an applicant, which submits a dossier according to the data requirements. The dossier is then assessed by risk assessors, so rapporteur member state first, and then the peer review by the European Food Safety Authority, which performs the assessment based on another set of regulations called the Uniform Principles. And once the risk assessment is concluded, the European Food Safety Authority, the EFSA, produces a dossier which is then evaluated by risk managers. So the Commission, DG Santé in this case, with the Standing Committee for Plant, Animal, Food and Feed, taking into consideration the risk assessed by the rapporteur member state and the European Food Safety Authority, takes a decision whether approving or not a certain active substance. As regard in particular biological substances, and namely microorganisms, I will tell you why specifically microorganisms, we have been identifying the bottleneck of taking to the market quicker microorganisms into these two pieces of regulation, the data requirements and the uniform principle for evaluation. So in our view, the acceleration of access to market of biological substances, in particular microorganisms, could have been provided by making these regulations more fit for purpose for both improving the quality of the dossier submitted by the applicant and improving the risk assessment performed by our risk assessors. In November last year, indeed, 4 pieces of regulations have been entering into applicability, which concerns amendment of the data requirements and the uniform principle for the assessment of dossier concerning active substances which are microorganisms. So the regulations 283/2013 and 284/2013 for the data requirements, and the regulation 546/2011 and the annex 2 to the regulation 1107/2009 as regard the uniform principle for the evaluation and approval criteria for microbiological active substances. If you're wondering why I'm talking about microorganisms only since 5 minutes, is because, of course, we needed to give a priority to our regulatory activities. And as you can see by the chart displayed, microorganisms, which is the blue bar at the bottom of each column, is the biggest group of low hazardous active substances approved in Europe. So you can see that the trend of low hazardous active substances approved in Europe is increasing. But the blue bar, so the microorganisms bar, it's the biggest one. So we decided to give priority to them also because microorganisms are often approved as low-risk active substances and are fully eligible to be used in organic farming. Now, in the last few slides, I would like to present you, let's say, more in general, the pipelines of our activities concerning biological active substances. And well, all in all, like as I said, the microorganisms have been given priority in the last years with these new regulations. So the arrow, the green arrow at the left side of your slide, of the slide, you see indeed what we have been discussing in the last minutes about the 4 new regulations on microorganisms. But this is not the only activity we undertook on microorganisms, because in March this year we have just endorsed 2 Commission communications, which are basically official documents from the Commission, not legally binding, but which are listing recommended test methods and recommended guidance document to be followed in order to fulfill the dossier on active substances, which are microorganisms. In addition, we are currently within the EU biopesticides working group working on developing explanatory notes, which is basically a guidance document which will allow better interpretation and reading of the new data requirements, which will, on one end, supporting companies to fulfill a dossier, and on the other hand, supporting the harmonization of the risk assessment performed by our risk assessors. Other activities are ongoing at OECD level as well. We are cooperating. We represent also the EU in the OECD expert group on biopesticides. We are working on developing new test methods for microorganisms, which will help access to market of these biological substances. And we are developing also the so-called consensus documents, so a sort of pre-digested risk assessment for some microbial species, in particular Bacillus aminoliquefaciens, Bovera bassiana at this stage, so that all the in the future strains which will come for assessment and for application, which are belonging to the species, will be assessed quickly. Other initiatives on microorganisms concern possible activities on active substances, which are viruses. We have several viruses already approved now, like baculovirus, but we are working on making the access to market quicker there, and also some procurement to support some collection of already existing information, for instance, on background level of microorganisms. As I said, however, our activities do not conclude on microorganisms only. We are also working on other kinds of biological pesticides that can take over from chemicals, like semiochemicals, botanicals, or other innovative active substances, which in principle, they are still chemicals. So they are still regulated under the so-called Part A of the data requirements, but of course they are low hazardous active substances. So our current regulatory framework already foreseen that for these substances, lower, let's say, level of information can be provided by the applicant. So the risk assessment is in a way kind of flexible here, and we always encourage applicants to discuss with risk assessors during pre-submission meeting on which is the best strategy to chase. We are also working on a document called problem formulation document, which is mostly focused on environmental risk assessment, which will help applicants to understand which data requirements can be waived and which data requirement can be provided for biological active substances. Other activities are ongoing on pheromones in particular, like we are exploring the possible extension of the SCLP definitions, so the straight chain Lepidopteran pheromone definitions. And as regards other innovative active substances like RNAi or peptides, for instance, we are really following really closely the evolution of science and the possible new case studies upon which we can build up our experience. This is the last slide, I guess. So far, we have mostly been talking about our activities which concern building up knowledge to ensure plant health in a more sustainable agriculture. These activities on improving and strengthening member state capacity is mostly concerning skill development and capacity building. It's been already 2 years that we have training sessions ongoing for risk assessors, which are trainings on risk assessment for microorganisms, which aims at improving ability of our risk assessor to evaluate microorganisms and harmonizing their assessment. And last but not least, we have recently also provided member states with some grants, over 10 million for over 5 years, which will support member states in hiring more experts still to perform evaluation and assessment of biological active substances. This was my last slide, and I'm of course open for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Deserio, for this very nice introduction about plant protection products and regulation. I'm now pleased to welcome Patrice Marchand from the Technical Institute for Organic Agriculture, France. He will present basic substances and more precisely improving knowledge on basic substances, what they are, their approval and use. Patrice, the floor is yours.
So, as you know now, basic substances are active substance regulated by Article 23 of the PPP regulation. They are pesticides, so even if they're acting as, take the second one, please.
Patrice, you should be able to change your slides.
Yeah. Even if there are biostimulants, if they are biotic biostimulants, they are still into the PPP regulation as the basic substances. They came starting 2014 in blue, inside the biocontrol substances in green, so they are almost 10% of the biocontrol substances. Almost every year we have some basics, unfortunately less and less, and we expect to get one more this year. The basic substance pathway is exactly the same as the PPP active substances, even more now because we have to use the Euclid software. Steps are admissibility, questions, approval, and of course for ourselves, organic production transfer allowance that's not already fully compatible for the basic substance, as well for microorganisms, because we can start to see herbicide microorganisms. That was for the Domenico point of view. We are actually at the point to get the 25th basic substance this year. So most of them are in full green, allowed in organic production. Also, there's 2 left, ongoing applications. Around 20 of the 25 active substance as basic approved were done by ITAB or by partners. So everything can be done as in terms of usages, even seed treatment, tool disinfection. So all the usages are open. We can see the last basic substance approved. In 2023, we should have 1 or 2 more basic substance. Sodium hypochlorite is coming in the middle of this year. Maybe not allowed in organic production, we'll see later. And you see in red a lot of non-approved or going non-approved basic substances. So from the beginning and from all the applications, only 36% were approved. The others were actually non-approved, withdrawn, or declared non-admissible. So in gray right now, you can see after approval of this basic substance, number of extension of uses. So you see that almost half of the extension users were validated, and there are still a lot of extension users ongoing. Here you can see both lines, blue for conventional production and green for organic production. And you can see in 2016, large switch because we allowed right now foodstuff allowed from plant extract or plant origin and animal origin directly going into organic production allowance. So we expect the next basic substance to be directly allowed in organic production. The trouble is that there's, as you can see, a lot of non-approved basic substance, although there are still foodstuff, there are still fertilizers, there are still feed stuff. So we found out that there is some trouble that as soon as the same substance is used for plant protection, it become dangerous. And on the other part of the European regulation, they are still allowed. Thanks for your attention. I give the floor to Gianfranco. Speaking
Thank
about
you, Patrice. Sorry, Gianfranco, I'll introduce you. So Gianfranco, the second phase of the basic substances, and he will introduce a project he has been coordinating. So the title of his talk is Collaborative Research and Knowledge Sharing on Basic Substances as an Environmentally Friendly Alternative to Synthetic Plant Protection Products for Plant. Gianfranco, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Baldissera. Thank you to Euphresco and ETP for organization of this interesting meeting. I'll just give a total review. Please, if you can enlarge full screen of what we gained with this Euphresco project. As we heard earlier by Dr. Deserio, let's go on. Okay, yeah. We need to be sustainable, so there is the SDG, and in Europe there is the European Union, there is the Farm to Fork strategy that plan the increase of tools for organic agriculture, reduction of food waste, and reduce synthetic pesticide. Then we have to reduce by half in all the country in a different way, and for example, in Italy we are on the top of this rank is not the best. It means that we have to reduce more than 50%. And at the same time, there are the retailers that request food, not with the allowed threshold, but they require much less as a number of active ingredients. As you see, there is a top number, 3 to 5, and as a percentage of MLR. And this makes the life of growers much more difficult. We know that not all the products have the same weight. So there are some compounds which we apply 1 kilo and the weight is 1 kilo. The standard compounds are the one that is multiplied per 8, candidate for substitution as copper per 16, and the provisional authorization for 64. And you can consult the list to see in which category it fell the compound. It was a call from Euphresco, and we answered to this call, and we produced this basics proposal just to spread innovation on those basic substances. Okay, so there are several units involved, and we are right closing the project, summarizing the data in a list of review. Okay. Okay. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah. We summarized the project in a review with all the participants from different countries, and some of those basic substances are already used in agriculture. For example, vinegar, sodium bicarbonate, chitin, nectar extract, mostly in organic agriculture. So we need to set up some protocols to define as better as we can the effectiveness. So we have 24 basic substances, as Patrice told, and for example, 8 of them can be approved, can be used on strawberries, or 13 of them, so more than half, can be used on grapevine. And one of them is a biopolymer that is called chitosan, that is obtained from crab shell. It produces a film onto the plant, and it increases the resistance of the plant. And there are a list of products that are on the market, and so it is available and it can be used by growers, and some of the people of some of the partners, for example, used here on sweet cherries to preserve sweet cherries during storage. You can see the gray is the lowest bar, the lowest line. It means that protected at best the cherries during storage from decay. Or, for example, we applied on grapevine to replace copper in organic agriculture toward downy mildew, and it provides good results both on the canopy and on the clusters. So the product is comparable to the copper, but we can get a wine, maybe it is one of the first, without copper and also without sulfur dioxide. Other activities were run, for example, by Patrice with lecithins, and here in the control of powder mildew, and these lecithins were very, very effective, and as well on Erysipeer necaton, so powder mildew, they applied away, and they had very good results, better than sulfur. So those basic stands can have a good potential, and they do not target directly the pathogen, but increase the resistance of the plants, so the plants can fight the pathogen and having a lower risk of disease. Then the project was summarized with a list of webinars, joint papers among the people of different units, scientific papers reported to the project, special issues, and also movement of young people from the different labs. So this network can support the HEPO and the other bodies in the innovation into the regulation, and also can provide information to the people that are involved in plant protection, and can interact with the policymaker as HEPO, ETP plants, PRIMA, also cost, and those investigations were run within a list of projects, and the last one is the cost that was just approved, and within this we can just go on with cooperation. For the ones that are interested, at the end of August, we will be in Paris to close this project and to have an overall discussion. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much, Gianfranco, and thank you also, Patrice, to keep your presentation within 15 minutes. You made a great work in summarizing not only the basic substances, but also the project. And now I'm pleased to welcome Neil Audsley from Ferroscience Limited. Neil will present another type of plant protection products, which is biological control. Also in this case, there was a Euphresco project, and the project was about preemptive biological control and preparedness against priority biosecurity threats. Neil, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present at this meeting. My control doesn't seem to be working.
The control should be working, Neil, but if you want, I can help you.
No, it doesn't seem to be working now for some reason. So I'll just ask you to move the slides on if that's okay.
Yes.
So could I have the next slide, please? Okay, I'll start by giving an introduction or some background into the work. I mean, you'll be aware that non-native invasive species are a great threat to global biodiversity and food security, resulting in substantial economic costs. And there's a huge number of non-native species that have been introduced into different ecosystems over the years worldwide. Now, the threats posed is increasing due to the globalization of trade, tourism, and also climate change, which allows the pests to expand their range. So measures have been introduced for the prevention and early detection of invasive species. However, it's the management tends to be reactive once the pest arrives and an outbreak is discovered. And if eradication isn't successful, strategies switch to managing the risk by population suppression, and slowing its spread. And this is exemplified by the management of emerald ash borer in North America and the longhorn beetles and Japanese beetles in both North America and in Europe, as well as spotted winged Drosophila on both continents. Next slide, please. Now, classical biological control is the deliberate introduction of a non-indigenous control agent, normally an invertebrate. And there's been over 6,000 introductions of biological control agents worldwide to control insect pests. And it's recognized as a key strategy to manage invasive pest species. And one example is the introduction of Torimus sinensis in Europe, including France, Italy, and England, to control the Oriental chestnut gall wasp. However, biological control or the introduction of an exotic biological control agent in classical biocontrol is subject to regulatory measures, including a rigorous risk assessment and review process. And this process can take many years before approval is granted. And certainly in the case of release of Torimus in the UK, it took us 6 years before we managed to obtain the license for release. And this allows the pest population to build up and spread. Not only that, after the release of the biological control agent, post-release evaluations are also needed to evaluate the establishment, spread and impact of the biological control agent. And this is not just the impact on the target pest itself, but also the non-target impacts. Hence, it's therefore important to identify future risks and prepare for managing those risks to help mitigate the impact that the establishment of an invasive species has on the native ecosystems. Next slide, please. So the figure shown in this slide shows the invasion curve for an invasive species. And it's clear from this curve that over time, the area of infestation increases and the cost to control or manage these pests, these invasive pests, also increases. Now, preventing the introduction of an invasive species is generally the most effective means of avoiding their establishment and spread. The difficulties and expense of reversing biological invasions means investment in prevention is likely to be the most successful and cost-effective response. Furthermore, eradication and control becomes increasingly difficult and costly as a species becomes established and spreads, as shown in this figure. So preemptive classical biological control is therefore seen as a novel approach with potential to enhance effective preparedness for a biological invasion of a pest species. In preemptive biological control, natural enemies can be selected, screened and pre-approved for release in the eventuality of a pest invasion. And it allows for the release of natural enemies against the target pests as a much earlier starting point. So the two strategies are marked in the figure. So normally classical biological control occurs once the pest is established and long-term management is required. However, preemptive biological control can be introduced much earlier on and prepared at the prevention stage. And so this can significantly reduce the economic and environmental damage that is associated with the pest. Sorry, next slide, please. Now, the importance of preemptive risk assessments and biological controls has been recognised in New Zealand by the Environment Protection Authority, who recently approved the conditional release of a parasitic wasp for the control of the brown marmorated stink bug. In England, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs has also recognised this importance and is currently funding work to prepare for potential invasion of emerald ash borer. And preemptive risk assessments for parasitic wasps for managing this pest, which is a high priority invasive species in England, are currently being undertaken. These risk assessments have identified areas of uncertainty, especially in relation to non-target impacts and potential for the parasitoids to hybridize with native species. And work is underway to address these uncertainties, so approval for release can be authorized in advance of an embryo spore incursion. Next slide, please. So this strategy, preemptive biological control, originally devised by the group in New Zealand, has led to the initiation of a Euphresco project on preparedness in biological control of biosecurity threats, which is jointly led by Plant and Food Research and Ferroscience Limited. It's a 2-year project which is currently coming to its end. It involves 17 partners from 12 companies, 10 from Europe, and then Australia and New Zealand. Now, the aim of this project is to establish a biological control network to build capacity and share knowledge and information on priority biosecurity threats and biological control agents to increase preparedness for incursions of invasive invertebrate species. It has 3 main objectives. It's to review the priority pests and potential for preemptive classical biological control, to produce a standard to assess the feasibility to conduct preemptive risk assessments, and then to establish a network and repository for the exchange of information. Next slide, please. So we started by identifying the key priority pests in partner countries. A total of 74 pests were identified, so these are all non-native species. The most significant pests, i.e. the ones that more than one partner country was interested in, were selected for further study. These included a mixture of Coleopteran, Dipteran, Hemipteran, and Lepidopteran pests. So for each of these selected pests, fact sheets were prepared describing the classical biological control for each pest. This included the history of classical biological control, and also identified the most promising natural enemies that could be used for biological control in areas where the pest is introduced. So some of these natural enemies were selected by partners to assess the feasibility of the preemptive biological control, which I will describe shortly. And an example of a fact sheet prepared by Ferrer on emerald ash borer is shown. Next slide, please. So the project partners have also worked together to develop a guideline document with an associated decision framework to assess the feasibility of starting preemptive risk assessments for the classical biological control agents. The guideline documents provide background information on the biological control agent, including an explanation of the principles and examples using this strategy. It also describes what characteristics may be suitable for preemptive biological control. And then section 2 goes into further details, selecting a suitable pest, and section 3 providing the guidelines for preemptive risk assessment. Next slide, please. So the decision framework is a simple flow diagram to assess the feasibility of initiating the preemptive risk assessment, and like the guidelines, is divided into sections. And this flow chart can be followed through and providing yes and no answers to provide a decision as whether to proceed or whether further work is required to proceed with the risk assessments. Much of this is related to the availability of the pest or biological control agent for testing under containment in partners' own or collaborator facilities. Next slide, please. The decision framework has been tested on a number of biological control agents by project partners, which have been identified from the key priority pest species. At Ferrer, we tested out the feasibility of preemptive risk assessments for use of the parasitic wasp, Phasgonophora sulcata, against the 2-line chestnut borer. Now, the outcome of the preemptive risk assessment for this particular biological control agent suggested would not be feasible. And the main reason for this was primarily due to the availability of the biological control agent itself and also whether the control agent, the climate in the UK, would be suitable for its release. In contrast, when tested out on the potato psyllid, the preemptive risk assessment for the parasitoid Tamarixa triosa would be feasible with the available information. However, it is still recommended to do climate modelling to assess its suitability to the UK climate. Next slide, please. And finally, to fulfil the requirements that we for the biological control network and sharing of information, we're establishing a website. We're establishing an online portal hosted on the New Zealand Better Borders Biosecurity website, and this will be used to extend the biocontrol network beyond the project partners to make the project document, including pest risk fact sheets, preemptive feasibility studies, risk assessments, and the guideline documents open access. So this will help build capacity and expand our knowledge on preemptive risk assessment. The portal is currently not live, but should be within the next 2 months. The guidelines, together with supporting risk sheets and feasibility studies, will be published in a suitable biological control journal. And this will allow the information to be freely available, thus making it easier for people conducting risk assessments in the future to find relevant information. Hence, this approach is a benefit to all. And it's the intention of the project partners to keep the network going at the end of the current project and to look for opportunities to further advance this work. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Neil Hotsley, for this very interesting presentation. And I'm now pleased to introduce Christophe Grondal from European Agroscience Services. So Christophe is one of the members of Plant for the Future ETP, and he will present the important work that Plant ETP is conducting on de-risking research and innovation for plant protection products, and the importance of capacity building and knowledge sharing. Christophe, the floor is yours.
So you can hear me? Perfect, thank you. First of all, thank you very much, and also Euphresco giving us the opportunity to share in advance the outcome of a research study we are currently conducting. As we have mentioned, it's about the de-risking of research and innovation for plant protection products, and with that also the importance of capacity building and knowledge sharing. So today I'm speaking in the name of Plant ETP as the chairman of the Working Group of Sustainable Agriculture. And this presentation is high level conceptually compared to the previous presentation, which were more about concrete case studies and examples. So we heard from the various speakers about the importance of innovation in the field of plant protection products. And one major driver is, of course, the Green Deal and Farm to Fork. And the question is how to implement high-level policy goals when they are connected towards a shift of technology driven by innovation. And usually you can group this kind of transformation period towards the target implementation in waves. So you have a first wave. This is a short-term perspective, and this is mainly about repositioning what is already available. And here we had a very great example with Domenico's first speech, is so that yes, we have to find smart and quick answers how to deal with our regulatory framework. The second one is about the midterm perspective. This is leveraging research and innovation, what is already in our pipeline, and everything which is regarded to disruptive technology, de novo R&I, is more on the longer term perspective, 10 years plus. So the R&I cycles in agriculture, specifically plant protection, product research are 10 years plus, and this is aiming really at a future market trends. But what is critical also to motivate innovators and also people who are investing in R&D and R&I is to create a safe environment, so where uncertainty is really kept at a minimum. Yeah, and so as one of our outcomes of our research is that at the moment, due to the different trends, technologies, regulatory situation, we see that there is some kind of uncertainty for the innovators in the market, and we want to shed some light into that and also make proposals in order to create more certainty, and with that also stimulate motivation to invest into these technologies. The Green Deal and Farm to Fork is probably putting a lot of pressure on the agricultural production systems, and one of the targets is to reduce the environmental impact, and this goes to the basic substances or the chemical inputs should be replaced ideally by residue-free alternatives. There is currently a lot of dynamic in that field, so we see that many reapprovals are delaying. Traditional solutions are becoming less and less available on the market, and the replacement by the required alternative are not in the speed as expected. This may cause some issues on agricultural production, and therefore innovation is important in order to avoid this. And with that also we need to have a kind of an environment so that is not limiting innovation. The question is, do we have currently a limiting situation for innovation, and why? Domenico showed this in his first slide. Farm to Fork is about going from the conventional farming practices based on chemical pesticides towards an integrated pest management approach. One of the prerequisites is that the portfolio of plant protection solutions is not only to be extended, but also substituted by new modalities. And these are not only the microbials, they are much more natural substances, proteins, peptides, RNA technology, and many, many more technologies which are being in discovery mode. And we really need to make sure that it shows at the moment that the decrease of chemicals is faster than the replacement of adequate new modalities, that this is not going to happen. If it's going to happen, so we will make also a dilemma situation, which really may cause also EU food production on midterm perspective. So therefore, we need to have an R&I landscape in Europe, which is really adaptive and which is also really accessible and innovation friendly for all kinds of innovators. So what are current bottlenecks for innovation? The regulatory framework for plant protection product is probably one of the most complex one, and it's designed for basic substances. And if we want to shift towards new modalities, it really needs to fit the purpose, and also the capacities of the regulatory bodies needs to be adjusted, so that projects for approval are being reviewed in a quick, fast, and also reliable way. And then the second topic is about the clarity and understanding of the new technologies. not only in terms of use cases, risk assessment, product safety, mode of action. It is complex because there is a complete new toolbox of solution being in development, way more diverse and complex compared to basic substances, and this needs to be understood. And then also being understood in terms of how to deal with the legislation. And that is usually an issue in science. It's usually moving much faster than also the legislation afterwards. And this current situation is creating uncertainty for innovators. And not only for the innovators, but also for people who want or organization to invest into innovations, like venture capitalists or maybe also corporates who has the respective money for that. As a consequence, we also see that Europe is currently lacking appropriate R&D infrastructure for innovators, and with that also required venture capital is not yet fully accessible. Not yet in the way as it could be and should be. Therefore, you may ask the question, is Europe really an R&I-friendly space? Let's pause this question and look to what are the opportunities and proposals. And this is basically a major part of our ongoing work within Plant ETP. So we are dealing with the question how to de-risk R&I for plant protection products. Then it's about the importance of capacity building and knowledge sharing. Capacity building in terms of creating R&I infrastructure for a much more diverse group of innovators compared to the basic substance innovators ecosystem, and knowledge sharing, of course. And with that, creation of an innovation-friendly environment in order to attract those startups or SMEs, and also encouraging organizations to invest in R&I. So our proposal is to establish a center of excellences to create an R&I-friendly environment. And how these center of excellences should look like. So in an ideal world, they are fully integrated R&D centers, so which are open, accessible for all kinds of stakeholders, innovators, corporate, venture capitalists, regulators, for example, or maybe academics and everybody else who has an interest in order to access this. And these centers could provide laboratory infrastructure, greenhouse and testing facilities, not only for the innovators to run and operate by themselves, but they could also be utilized as services for expert capabilities, for example. So kind of a hybrid model, open lab space or lab space which has been operating in a service mode. The same is true also for offices and meeting spaces, where you should, where one also should find project management and consultancy expertise, which can be flexibly used for a project assignment or maybe also on a long-term assignment. So we believe it makes sense that those kind of center of excellences are being operated by third parties who are providing infrastructure, the services, and also the expertise, and also making sure that fixed costs are managed properly. Because by sharing infrastructure, by sharing expertise, by sharing knowledge, it is also possible to lower the cost of the investment, which is in the end then also an advantage of each and every single project for further development. We see already by today that the future toolbox of plant protection products is about different modalities. It's not only the chemicals. So we have different modalities, meaning that the landscape is becoming diverse and more complex. And therefore, we also propose that those kind of COEs should focus on core technologies. For example, microbial technology or protein peptide technology. So making sure that the expertise is really concentrated in these center of excellences. Decision makings are much faster. There's full understanding of the technology available, and this then also should accelerate the technology development in the program. It is about to attract innovators, accelerate technology, and associate all relevant stakeholders being active in this area. This is part of our exercise. It is going to be published end of this year in November. So we intend to compile a policy brief, which will be publicly available. And so please stay connected, stay tuned. You can find us on Plant ETP. You can follow us on social media like Twitter, LinkedIn, and now looking to the time, it's 3 o'clock on time, Amrit, and so that's in the Valdicera, so that we now can go into the Q&A. And you may have questions. I'm really happy to also to learn your questions and go into discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christoph, and thanks to all the speakers. This has been very well timed, really at a perfectly time. So yeah, really appreciate that. So we have about 25, 28-ish minutes for Q&A. I see we have a few questions already in the Slido. And so for those of you that might have come in a bit later, we're taking questions through Slido. So you just go to slido.com or slido.do. And then you tap in the hashtag that is in the chat, which is planthealth_GW23. So I will get straight to the questions here. We have a question from Iamantas. I hope I'm saying that properly. I think this is a kind of a general question, so maybe a nice kind of starter to get some reflections maybe from the panel. So in your view, more sustainable agricultural systems should be more intensive or more extensive? So anybody that would have some thoughts, feel free to just unmute and come in. No one with any thoughts on this or any opinion?
If I can.
Sure, please.
Now there is a trend toward the sustainable intensification. Since we grow on the face of the earth, we eat, maybe too much, but we eat, and it is going toward a uniform growth all over the world. Then we need to produce better and more. And also, a colleague told that when we go to get shopping, we require quality, but we require higher quality. It means that the fruits or vegetables or whatever that are not perfect became waste. So the quality induces waste. So we should change our habits just to have more food, because if we recover circular economy, or we use the fruit that are not perfect. For example, in France, it was a project time ago that was ugly but good. So a fruit that is not perfect is still good to eat. Or we can remove the part that has something that is not perfect. So this is, I think, my point of view, my few cents.
I would add to quality safety also.
Thank you, Gianfranco, and thank you, Petrus, for adding on to that. Are there any other thoughts on this question? No? Then we'll go to the next question. This is actually a question from Gianfranco here in the panel to Domenico. When you see that the regulations, when you feel that the regulation makes easier or faster the registration of biological agents, can that be approved? So wait, let me just reformulate that. Do you think that the regulations make it easier, or regulations to make it easier for approval of biocontrol agents? Do you think that can be approved, or for the approval of those biological agents? Do you think that could be made easier or faster? I think you touched a little bit on that with the microbials. This is something that the Commission is working on, I think, right?
Yeah, my understanding of the question, I wanted to make sure. The question is about when the regulation level 7 will be changed, basically. Is that my interpretation correct?
Yeah, not that, but one that makes easier the approval of biocontrol agents. Easier and less expensive and faster.
Yeah, so I assume you don't refer to the data requirements which I've been mentioning in my regulation, because those are already into applicability. At the moment, the regulation 1107, which is the one regulating access to market of a plant protection product, is the same for all the active substances and plant protection product. With, under regulatory point of view, they are either chemical or non-chemical, which is either chemical or microorganisms. And low hazardous chemical active substances, which can be pheromones, for instance, or other biological control agent, are regulated under, let's say, the same regulation. But as I mentioned, of course, the dossier required to take these substances to the market is usually less demanding. Of course, we are always being asked when a new regulation will be developed, or when the regulation 1107, so regulating the access to market of pesticides, will be reopened in order to make the whole system more suitable for making biological control agent quickly to the market. The answer to that is that we identified that the bottleneck is not in the regulation itself. We understand that there are points that may be improved, but the provision of the 1107 are currently not even always respected. Like, for instance, low-risk plant protection product should be authorized at member state level in 120 days by member state, and this almost never happens. So in our view, the bottleneck of taking low risk, low hazardous active substances to the market quicker is improving member state capacity, improving quality of the dossier to be assessed. And this is why we are undertaking, and we have undertaken, the initiatives I mentioned before. We need to always take into consideration that we have a strict deadline, which is the farm to fork strategy, which is given by the farm to fork strategy, which is 2030. And if we had even think about planning to open the 1107 and we work on it, it would have taken much, much longer. So we would have not really be able to make this possible initiative profitable for the farm to fork strategy objective. So this is why at the moment we are working on these initiatives I've been exploring. I've been mentioning before in my presentation. I hope this answered the question. If not, please let me know, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I have a few questions here. So one actually question here from anonymous. So future-proof plant protection products will need all available technological approaches. Will genome-edited plants be welcomed by organic agriculture? Is a question. So not directed at anyone in particular. Maybe Patrice, you can have some reflections on that since you're working on agriculture or organic agriculture.
No, I can't answer this. I mean, we have authorities in the organic sector. So they are working on all kind of stuff, including sterile insects right now. So I cannot answer for them. This would be discussed for sure soon. They are starting to open stuff, as I mentioned, for basic substance. There is a direct transfer of the basic substance food from plant and animal origin directly into organic production. There will be soon, I guess, if it was voted last week, a direct transfer of low-risk substances from animal and plant origin also. So this would be straightforward, and we are going to get few low-risk But for other stuff, it's why I said to Domenico that all microorganisms were supposed and told that they were all allowed in organic farming. So, but I've seen last months actually under derogation, but microorganism running as an herbicide. So this would be discussed in organic sector as well. And this would maybe change the discourse of the organic sector about microorganisms. But of course, I'm not involved in this discussion at member state level, of course. But there would be somehow position from ECTOF and position from IFRAM as well.
Yes, thank you. Does anybody have a reflection on NGTs in organics or NGTs in general? Or yeah, I say NGTs because this is the term used here in Brussels. But yeah, genome editing is one of the tools within NGTs. But yes, but I can only say legally, anything that's regulated as GMO, as gene editing is at the moment, is not compatible with organic farming. So that's as we stand now. Then now the Commission is working on developing a legislative proposal that will be published next month, that many of us are waiting for, after a long time. And so what comes out of that, and whether the status of NGTs will be revised to something other than GMOs, then that remains to be seen. And then how that will align with the organic legislation will also remains to be seen. So I have some other questions here. So there's one here for Neil. Preemptive biological control seems a good idea. For parasitoids without their main host, how do we manage for them to survive enough to give guarantees? I don't know, is that a clear question?
Yeah, no. I mean, one of the requirements to get a license to release a non-indigenous biological control agent, certainly in the UK, is that you've got to prove that the parasitoid will survive once it's released. So you do climatic matching. So I mean, there's absolutely no guarantee that it will survive. And of course, you can do all the experiments you want in the laboratory, but when you transfer that to the field, it often changes. But generally, if as a rule of thumb, I guess if the pest is invaded and is surviving, there's a good chance the parasitoid will as well, although that's not always the case. But to get establishment of exotic biological control agents, you normally do more than one release. So in the case of Torimus sinensis, and certainly in Italy and France, as far as I know, they did 2 releases of the biological control agent to ensure that the establishment. And we certainly did 2 releases in the UK. The second one was done last year, so we're still monitoring its establishment and spread. But you've really got to match up the climate to ensure it's the right conditions.
Question to Neil. Are you going to follow future European regulation on microorganisms too? Or
sorry, can you?
There is a French regulation on microorganisms right now, and it looks like some countries are already taking part or full of this, and it's a point to harmonize this at European level. Are you involved in that regulation or following discussions on that?
No, but I would be interested in following the discussion, certainly, but I'm not involved.
Maybe I can partially answer Patrice. There was a report published by the Commission in December last year upon a request from the Council on possible impact on an harmonization at EU level on the regulation for invertebrate biological control agent, which at the moment is only regulated at member state level. And unfortunately, the output was not complete because based on the information available, it was not possible to conclude if a new harmonized regulation would have been an asset to justify an EU initiative, because we know that for the subsidiarity principle, we can only take an EU level decision where this gives advantages compared to what can be done already at member state level. And however, the output of this dossier, it's currently under discussion still with the Parliament and the Council. So there's discussion ongoing there. Sorry, UK is not, of course, involved because for a good reason. But yeah, we are always happy to share our, like at the OECD level with other countries.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, and thanks, Domenico, for adding to that. So we have a question now to Christoph. So what are the estimates of EU food production fall if the input as we speak about will not change rapidly? And which crops are most troublesome? I don't know if this is something you can answer.
Yeah, so this is something I can't answer, to be honest, because I do not have the respective information now available. And it really depends on the available solution on the markets. So let's keep fingers crossed that it can be really reduced to a minimum. And also, for example, if a product is banned off the market and lacking of alternatives, there is still the opportunity also for this emergency uses for a short period of time approval. I think this is a kind of a tool in order to mitigate the current situation. Nonetheless, there is pressure and urgency on new technologies and also finding ways to smartly maneuver them through the current framework, legislation framework, and also to introduce them into the market. Maybe Domenico, do you have any kind of information regarding to that question?
Yeah, I was going back trying to read the question, so because I was not sure I fully grasped it. But if I will remember, it's about basically on which kind of crops it is better to focus the innovation as regard biological alternative to chemicals. If I well understood, then my answer would be arable crops and herbicides, of course, because you know, all the discussion we're having on glyphosates and other chemical substances which are used as herbicides. So I always hear in conferences about biological control that whoever finds a really effective biological substance which is able to control weeds is going to find this, the Saint Grail of the biocontrol. And arable crops as well is very critical because we recently ran a survey. I mean, we asked IBMA, so the International Manufacturer Biological Control Agent Association, to let us know what are the products in the pipeline. So how is the development of new alternative to chemical hazardous chemical pesticide going on? And we found out there is a space for improvement for arable crops, so cereals, for instance. This might answer the question, maybe.
Thank you for adding to that. I think you covered. I would agree with you in terms of the types of crops. It seems to be more the kind of more arable crops, the more commodity crops, which are grown in bigger quantities as well, so tend to also be more exposed. And then towards the first part of the question, which was what kind of fall in production are we expecting? As Christoph said, this is very hard to say. There's been a lot of studies, especially when just a year after the Farm to Fork was announced. Some were best case scenarios, some were worst case scenarios, and they're all based on a lot of assumptions and predictions. So it could be anywhere from 10% production loss to 25 or even 30. Again, there's not only the Farm to Fork, there's also the biodiversity strategy, which requires farmers to put aside 10% of their land for biodiversity. So that's already just by itself potentially 10% drop in production in Europe. So there's a lot of things that factor in, and so that's part of innovation isn't the only solution, but we do need to have some kind of groundbreaking innovation to compensate for that production loss. So we have a few more questions here. Gianfranco, someone was asking about, you mentioned something about the weight or the weight of the use of pesticides during your presentation, and then how they impact the environment. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. We have to assume, we have to start from the assumption that not all the products are the same. If we tell that we have to reduce of half the amount of synthetic pesticide, not all the products weigh the same. So if we use 1 kilo of a low risk substance, that can be, we have them some biocontrol agents, or we can have, for example, Kosoga or Cervisan, or orange essential oil and similar compounds. You apply 1 kilo and the weight is 1 kilo. So multiplicator is 1. If you use a standard compound, whichever it is, it weighs 8 times. If you apply a candidate substitution, as nowadays copper, but maybe tomorrow it can become again good compound, so it can fall in the standard category, but it is the biggest one now with around 300 active ingredients. So copper candidate substitution, you also multiply per 16, so you use 1 kilo, but you have to multiply per 16. If you use something that is a provisional authorization, something that is not registered, it is not anymore registered, but you have to use because you have a pathogen, a pest, for example, for nematicides, there is something that weight, it is renewed year by year, and it weighs 64. So you use 1 kilo, but in the list, in the calculation, it means 64. In this trend, there are some compounds that are, we have to foster organic agriculture. So in Grapevine, somebody calculated time ago that at least in Italy, 80% in weight of what we apply is sulfur, that is 69%, and copper, it is 11%. So on 100 kilo, 80 are of compounds for organic agriculture. Both of them we may found in the near future in the lowest category. So copper, that is now a candidate substitution, may become a standard product, and sulfur, that is now a standard product, may become a low-risk compound. But I guess that Domenico De Serio knows something more and can implement what I told.
Well, maybe I can make things more complicated talking about microorganisms and the issue of making a comparison between living organisms and copper or whatever else is not livable. It's indeed a good question, and it's indeed a good information from Gianfranco Romanazzi, because making a comparison among different compounds or different substances, statistically speaking, it's very complicated. I can add a bit on microorganisms because we need to make a comparison also between which amount of microorganisms is substituting which amount of chemicals. And we are now not having a direct and straight answer to that. We are actively discussing with our colleagues from the Directorate General of Statistics, the Commission, trying to find the best solution to approximate something which probably with the current body of knowledge is not going to lead to a really scientifically sound outcome. But of course, we need to find an approximation. And yeah, like as Dr. Romanazzi said, we need to find some factors to normalize what is, let's say, the baseline situation, like which in the case he has explained, can be use of different chemicals for different purposes. So chemicals which have different status, like candidate for substitution, allowed it to be used in organic farming and so on and so forth. Or as mentioned, in the case of microorganisms, they are made of different nature. It's a really complicated question. It's a really complicated answer to give, also because another layer of difficulty is the fact that we need to ask questions and ask data which are easy to be retrieved. Because we talk about science, we talk about theories. It's also, of course, like there are plenty of ideas, but it's also difficult to find the right answer, which also works in practice. So it's a huge challenge.
Thank you, Gianfranco and Domenico, for that. Yeah, I can imagine it's how to count the weights. I know I saw, what was it, last year there was in the newspaper an estimation in France where they said, oh, in France in I think it was 2021 the use of pesticide had gone up, but then it turned out it was because, well, the amount, rather, the quantity had gone up because there were more organic farming, and so they need to use higher quantities of lower hazard products, and so in the end there was a whole discussion about how then do you kind of compare these different things, because they are a bit apple and oranges, and at some point do you need to put them all at the same level, but whether that scientifically makes any sense, maybe not, but politically that needs to be done at some point. So I don't envy you in trying to figure that out. So we only have a few minutes left, but there's still a few questions. So there's a more general question, which is something I hear a lot, actually, this question. How realistic is the use of RNA molecules as biopesticides in the near future? And are there any preliminary dates for the first RNAi product in Europe? So this is a much more general question. I'm happy to have any kind of input from Christoph. Do you want to?
I think the likelihood is very high from my perspective. Of course, in the end, it's all about the approval, but I know that several projects are, let's say, in discussion with regulatory bodies in Europe in order to introduce the first projects. The technology has huge potential for various kind of applications. If it's really, let's say, also delivering on its promises, that's basically what needs to be figured out for sure. But I think this is what we need. So we need these new approaches, we need the new technology, and then also, let's say, having them available in order to develop them further. Yeah, I mean, this is just a start. Even though a product would be introduced into the market, this is just a start, and based on that, it's all about learning and further engineering and improving and developing, so that it really can be a super strong alternative in the toolbox of each farmer.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Maybe I can add just briefly that the regulation as such allows already the registration of RNAi in Europe. So as I mentioned before, whatever is not a microorganism under a regulatory point of view is a chemical substance. So of course, like we would expect discussion needed between the applicants and the rapporteur member state on preparing a dossier which would be kind of pioneering the way, because we know there are some substances in the pipeline. So the companies which are, let's say, leading this pioneering activity are more than welcome to proceed and go ahead. Of course, we cannot develop a full-fledged regulation before having had some case studies ahead. Before I heard someone saying that science is faster than regulation. I really wish it's going to be always like that, because of course we cannot take regulatory decision by flipping the coin. We need case studies first. We need things, data, and knowledge of our scientists to be really robust before taking regulatory decisions. So the current regulation allows already RNAi to be on the market, but to develop a more robust approach, we need, of course, like case studies first.
Thank you. Yes. So I think we're almost done. I just want to address one question that's here that was aimed at Christoph about how to contribute to the work that you presented, and if there would be an open consultation or a possibility to join the group. Maybe I'll just answer on behalf of Plants for the Future. So the work that Christoph presented, as he mentioned, he's the chair of our working group on sustainable agriculture, where we look at different solutions and challenges for the transition towards more sustainable agriculture. And this is an internal group within our membership of the members of the platform. So we will be sharing this report as soon as it's ready towards the end of the year, and you'll see it on our website, on all our social media. But yes, as externals, we're always happy to get some feedback, but we don't do consultations or so on there. Perfect. So I will now hand the floor back. So thank you everyone for all the speakers for your presentations and your Q&A. I'll hand the floor back now to Baldissera to close the session.
Thank you very much, Amrit. So I would like to conclude by saying that I'm a great supporter of open science in all its forms. And one of these forms is definitely the opening of research projects to stakeholders. And I think the field of plant protection products is one where there will be a lot of benefits if groups are created where researchers that develop solutions can work together with the research stakeholders that regulate or use these solutions. So these projects can then be used to educate the non-expert, to learn from each other, and this allows building trust, it favors harmonization of practices and accelerate adoptions. I really believe that this kind of project will allow government to move from the approach decide, announce, defend, to engage, deliberate, decide, and act. And this is very important because we have to build trust in an era where there is a lot of distrust on research and a lot of polarizations of ideas. So then the leitmotif of this Green Week on the importance of green skills makes a lot of sense because these skills will empower society and will contribute to the green transition. Unfortunately, and I'm speaking here as a coordinator of a research funding network, opportunities to support collaborations on the topics that were presented during this webinar are limited. And it is then important that more resources are engaged to secure the work, but also the discussions on basic substances and biological control agents. I would like to remind that this webinar has been recorded. It will be posted on YouTube, and as a participant, you will receive the link and will obviously also advertise through our social media channels. Thank you very much for your attention, and don't hesitate to contact us if you want to work with us or if you need more information. Have a good afternoon.